You want to improvise or play solos, but how? Or maybe you do know how, but you just want to get better at it. Well, here are 5 tips to help you with some easy improvisation. First of all, sing along with what you're playing. This keeps you from playing patterns and shredding, like for example, like it's cool, it really is cool and it is flashy, but if you want to get better at it, I would suggest singing along to what you're playing. Because anything you're playing could be, and maybe should be, but at least could be something singable, something a less musical family member might be able to sing along to. So instead of, maybe do something like, there's nothing wrong with this whatsoever, and personally I even prefer this style of playing over the shredding, but that is personal preference. But while we're at it, to take the exact opposite of shredding, let's see if we can play something good, something that sounds nice, using the fewest amount of notes possible. Now, before we go all the way down to 1 note, let's start with something like, I don't know, 3 notes. So. Okay, so what I'm doing here mostly, I try to give you an idea of how chords might change when I'm playing this, but the most important thing I'm trying to get across is that you can rest on 1 note, play any of these notes you want, rest on a different note. You got a different sound. It's now a different phrase with a different ending or a different start. And again, it's different. So this is sort of challenging you to create as much variation as you can using only 3 notes. You could do this with 2 notes. You could even do it with a 1 note. And that brings me to the 3rd tip. Play with rhythm. Why? Because rhythm and groove is more important than the actual note choice. So sometimes we can get enamored, I guess, with this beautiful note that somebody chose to go to. Now that's great, and that's a new sound and a new color, and I wouldn't want to keep you from doing this. But before you explore all the different notes you could choose, try and see how many different rhythms you can use and how much you can do with rhythm. One mistake people keep making is that they think that each time they're hitting a string, it needs to be a new note, and that's not true at all. First priority is to groove. Second priority would be to play something singable. So I'm just playing something here, anything, just going back and forth between 2 chords, just so we have some kind of groove, right? And now let's see what soloing might sound like. Now imagine do the same thing, but this time we're actually changing notes. So. So I didn't play a new note each time I hit a string. I doubled notes occasionally, or actually I did that all the time, but I stuck to a certain groove. And then the melody can just fall into that groove, and that really helps you with playing something that sounds good, even when you're just making it up on the spot. Now, the 4th tip, especially if you're coming from a different instrument, but also if guitar is your first instrument, learn the pentatonic scales, because it's gonna help you out a lot. Why? Let's take A minor, for example. So you would play, or now those notes will sound good almost every time, no matter what you play. It's a bit of an exaggeration because chords can do weird stuff that would cause these notes to become weird. But generally speaking, if a song is just basic chords, going from A minor to F here, probably C, G afterwards because it's kind of a cliche. Now on all these chords, I could just play A minor pentatonic. So the pentatonic scale is basically the major scale or the minor scale, but we've removed these semitone distances. And because of this, there's probably more that can be said about this, and I'll get back to it in a minute, but because of this, the notes all sound very natural. There's this video by Bobby McFerrin called The Power of the Pentatonic Scale, showing you how natural it is for people to sing pentatonicism. It's just da 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 da. It's very natural. You hardly have to think about it at all. And so when you're playing a melody using these notes, it's going to sound very natural to your listener as well, even when some of those notes don't fit the chord perfectly. Like an F major triad, where you would play this note on. It would actually be the major 7th, you're now turning it into F major 7th, but if nobody in the band is playing major 7th, you're the only one playing it, it's going to sound kind of weird. But because this context makes this note sound so self-explanatory, like that there's nothing strange about it at all, because the note sounds natural in the melody, it's going to sound like you just added it to the chord. So the pentatonic scale helps you come up with something singable, with something where the notes will sound good. It will make sure you don't have to think about those notes as much, so you can focus on the rhythm and on the groove. But there's one last reason why pentatonicism is so interesting. I mentioned earlier the major scale and the minor scale remove the semitones from the scale, and then you get pentatonic scale. So what this means in practice is that the major scale is now missing the 4th and the 7th. Now, why is that relevant? Well, the difference between Ionian, Lydian and Mixolydian, maybe you don't know those scales yet, but I'm going to teach you a simple way to think about it right now. Ionian has the perfect 4th and the major 7th. So, perfect 4th, okay, 5, 6, 7, 1, and there's the 7. Now Mixolydian is the same scale, except the 7th is lowered to a minor 7th. And Lydian is the same scale as the major scale, except the 4th is raised to the augmented 4th. Okay, so the difference between Ionian, Lydian and Mixolydian lies in which kind of 4th you're playing and which kind of 7th you're playing. As long as you're playing C major pentatonic or A minor pentatonic, you can't tell the difference between those scales. But by adding one of those notes, I'm now suddenly turning this pentatonic scale into one of these church modes. And the reason I like this so much is because the church modes can become very confusing when you're first learning about them. And this makes sure that you become acquainted with the one sound of that church mode, while also giving you a pentatonic framework to work off of, something you're probably going to be a lot more familiar with, and that's going to come a lot more naturally. And this will work for both major and minor scales, because minor scales are missing the 2nd and the 6th, and the 2nd will be lowered in Phrygian, and the 6th will be a major 6th in Dorian. Regardless, there's 2 notes that you can add. Now I'll admit this is the most advanced tip of these 5. If you've already been playing with the previous 4 tips and this is going really well, this 5th tip is the next thing to try and add to your repertoire. Okay, now the last tip, the 5th tip, you have to play the chords. Now how you can start is by, let's say we're soloing over F, right? And we know this F chord. Now we're just going to look at all those frets, every little square that we're taking here, and we're just going to use those notes to solo with. Not to play the entire chord. So that would be something like... Okay, so that's kind of boring after a while. I'm using rhythm and singability, so not playing too much, not playing too fast, but also just rhythm to make it sound good. But in terms of note choice, it's very boring at this point, but it's a very important stage to get past. Try and play with just these chord tones, because afterwards, when we're going to go from, I don't know, F, C, D minor, B flat, okay? You know what, I'm going to take this C. Although you could take just this one, also use the open strings. And then D minor, again just using these notes, and B flat, just using these notes. Now the reason we're doing this is because I want to make you super conscious of where those notes are on the fretboard, because the 5th tip is to connect the chords. And this is going to sound like Everything you've been doing is completely intentional because you're playing with rhythm, you're in the groove, and you're connecting the chords in a way that's singable. And all of that together is going to result in, well, great melody, great improvisation. What does connecting the chords sound like? Now, first of all, we're going to take a step in between. Instead of really improvising and playing a melody that connects the chords, let's get all those chord tones down. So I'm going to play F, C, D minor, B flat. Maybe when I'm looking for my freedom, when I'm looking for which routes I can follow, I'm going to still choose between this C and this C. Okay, so I'm hopefully giving you some kind of idea of what that might sound like. Still, it's not the greatest music there is, but I'm trying to play chord tones of one chord and then the chord tones of the next chord and the chord tones of the next chord. Eventually, this could be something like... So that's just connecting chord tones. Now you want to create a melody that's targeting one of these notes from these chords and connecting it to the next note of those chords. So what does connecting mean? Well, it's simpler than you might think. We have F and we have C. And maybe I want to start on this note out of F, and I'm going to pick a note on the same string for now, just to illustrate the point. So that would be this one. So connecting simply means we're doing this. So instead of playing na 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 na, I'm going to connect it by na na na, by just walking up within the scale. So na 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 na. I almost didn't have any air left. If you can connect all your chords constantly while staying within the groove and playing something singable, you're gonna be a star with all your improvisation and all your solos for songs you might be writing, bands you're playing in, whatever it may be. But using all those concepts together will get you to sound professional, even when you're not technically advanced enough to shred yet. If you want to get better at crafting melodies, check out this video because it's all about melody and that includes improvisation and guitar solos. Or maybe you find harmony more interesting and then this one might be for you. See you guys next time. The video has ended, right? I can get up? Okay.